Have you ever been in a leadership position, or maybe even just working on a really critical team project,
Mm.
and you just feel that deep, quiet frustration of watching potential just slip through the cracks? I
Yeah.
mean, whether it's a brilliant idea, a talented person on your team, or even just, your budget. It's not a lack of resources,
Yeah.
and it's often not even a lack of frantic effort.
No, it's that hidden gap. It's the one our sources really highlight, the
Mhm.
thing that separates organizations that are always scrambling, always reacting, and just hitting ceiling after ceiling
Yeah.
from those that quietly, consistently multiply their momentum year after year.
That is the perfect way to frame it. And that's really why we wanted to do this deep dive, right?
Mm.
It's all about this single crucial concept
Yeah.
that the research suggests is the real lasting competitive edge in this crazy landscape we're in.
Right. Stewardship.
Stewardship.
Yeah.
But we really need to define what we mean by that word for this conversation,
Well, absolutely.
because we're not talking about, charity
Hmm.
or some vague environmentalism.
No, not at all. We're talking about a profound operational mindset. Stewardship is the intentional ability to treat every single resource, every decision, and every person as part of something worth building, protecting, and sustaining, well beyond your own time in that role.
So our mission today is really to unpack that, both the intellectual shift and the practical steps you need to take to move from just managing output.
The tasks, the inbox.
Exactly, the inbox, to truly living this steward's mindset every day. Because here's the core idea, right? Stewardship isn't some initiative you launch with a PowerPoint.
No, it's a mindset you live. And when it's really embedded, it multiplies your impact in ways that traditional reactive management just can't touch. It sounds simple, but the shift is fundamental. It requires what the sources call an intellectual, almost spiritual pivot.
Okay, so let's unpack that pivot. We have to start with the foundational difference, right? The owner versus the steward. How does that dichotomy really frame how we look at responsibility?
It's a complete perspective flip. The ownership mindset, it basically says, this is mine, I control it, and it serves my immediate goals.
Right, my department, my numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the stewardship mindset says something totally different. It says, this has been entrusted to me. I am responsible for cultivating it, for multiplying its potential for a greater good. And this is the key part, even if that good only shows up after I've left the role.
Wow. Okay, so one leads to hoarding and short-term thinking.
And exploitation, yeah.
Yeah.
The other fosters generosity, long-term responsibility, and this really expansive perspective that values legacy over just getting that immediate win.
And to really give this concept the weight it deserves, the research goes right to the theological bedrock of it.
It does. We, as leaders, as managers, have to recognize that we aren't the ultimate owners. We're tenants or trustees.
Trustees, I like that. The sources remind us the earth is the Lord's, which means everything is fundamentally owned by a higher power. Or, if you want a secular context, it's owned by the mission and the organization's future.
That identity of being a trustee, not a king, is so powerful. And it's rooted right in the Genesis mandate for humanity. We were told to subdue and have dominion.
Words that can sound a little harsh today.
They can, but the Hebrew word for subdue, kavash, it really suggests diligent management, productive use, heavy lifting, not crushing or exploiting.
Okay.
And then later, we're commanded to work it and keep it. Avad means to serve or cultivate, and shamar means to guard or protect. So it's a dual duty.
So you have to actively improve it, while at the same time responsibly guarding its integrity.
Precisely. It's never just about guarding what you have. It's an active mandate for cultivation.
And that right there brings us to the ultimate goal, which is proliferation, not just preservation. This is where the whole system really takes off.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the parable of the talents, which is just such a potent management lesson, the servant who was condemned, he was the one who buried his talent.
Right. He didn't lose it. He kept it perfectly safe.
He preserved it perfectly, out of fear. And his preservation-only mindset was what was condemned as unfaithful because he failed to seek strategic growth.
That is such a powerful reframe. So what does a modern buried talent look like in an organization today? I mean, it's not literally burying cash.
No. It's structural stagnation. It's the leader who hoards all the institutional knowledge because they're afraid of becoming irrelevant if they share it.
Or the team that sticks with ancient, inefficient technology because a new system feels too risky.
Exactly. Or refusing to delegate a complex task because you're afraid your subordinate might make a mistake. All of those actions preserve the current state, but they actively starve any potential for long-term multiplication. Faithful effort requires strategic risk.
So what you're saying is that fear isn't just paralyzing, it's an active act of unfaithfulness to the potential you were given.
It is. That fear-based preservation-only approach is what separates that perpetually scrambling organization from the one that just quietly compounds its momentum.
And that compounding has to start with the tangible resources right in front of us. I guess the most sacred and non-renewable one of all is time.
Time.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about
Right.
time. Because leaders are just constantly trapped by what they call the tyranny of the urgent. The phone rings, the email pings.
The deadline looms, but a steward understands there are two fundamentally different kinds of time.
Right. Chronos and Kairos.
Yes. Chronos is that sequential, measurable time. The clock ticking, the hours you work. But Kairos is opportune, qualitative time. It's the right moment for impact, the time you set aside for reflection, that moment of breakthrough.
So stewardship means managing the Chronos.
So you can seize the Kairos.
Okay, so how does a leader apply this practically? The most actionable takeaway here points right to the Eisenhower matrix. Stewards have to focus on the not urgent important tasks.
This quadrant is. It's the laboratory for the steward. This is where your planning, your development, your deep reflection, your proactive maintenance, this is where it all lives.
These are the things that prevent future fires.
Exactly. They prevent future crises that would otherwise land you squarely in the urgent important quadrant. A practical discipline here is just aggressively scheduled deep work blocks or mandatory thinking time that the whole organization has to respect.
So if time is the first resource, talent is the second. Shifting from time to talent. A stewardship leader sees their team in a radically different way.
They do. They view their team not as interchangeable cogs in a machine, but as what the sources call a sacred garden of unique gifts.
A sacred garden, I love that.
It's rooted in recognizing the imago Dei, the intrinsic worth and dignity in every single person. And if you believe that, it means you don't just utilize talent to hit a metric, you cultivate it for its own sake and for the long-term benefit of the whole.
So multiplication here means you are just relentlessly focused on developing that talent.
On empowerment.
Exactly. You're investing heavily in challenging assignments, continuous learning, and pushing decision-making authority down to the lowest appropriate level.
Yeah.
And this leads us straight to a critical failure point the sources highlight: micromanagement. Ah, yes. Micromanagement is a failure of stewardship. Why?
Because it operates entirely from that ownership mindset. I must control this outcome because I'm afraid others won't do it exactly as I would.
It's a total lack of trust.
A deep lack of trust. It stifles the team's ability to take initiative, and it guarantees that their potential is neglected and, eventually, it shrinks. Micromanagement is fear-based preservation, not growth-based proliferation.
So instead of that, the sources give us these examples of leaders creating what they call micro moments of stewardship. Can you give us a sense of what those look like?
Sure. One example was just rotating ownership roles for routine processes. So if you manage the budget this quarter, I'll manage the agenda for the next one.
Spreading the responsibility.
Right. Another was mandatory reflection circles, where the team reviewed not just what they achieved, but how they spent their time and used their resources. It wasn't about blame. It was about building accountability and trust across the whole team.
That kind of cultural integration pivots us neatly into stewarding the intangibles, the assets you can't put on a balance sheet, but which determine your long-term legacy. Let's start with reputation and trust.
Trust is the high-value, high-fragility asset. It's earned only through consistent, ethical behavior. The research reminds us, quoting Proverbs, that a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches.
That's our integrity checkpoint right there.
It is. A steward ensures their words, their actions, and their stated values are consistently aligned. Any inconsistency, any self-serving behavior, it acts like a corrosive acid on trust. And trust, once it's destroyed, it takes exponentially more time and effort to rebuild than it took to lose.
So a steward understands their reputation isn't just their own.
No, it belongs to the mission and the community they serve.
Okay, let's move to the second intangible. Knowledge and information. We are drowning in data in the digital age. The challenge isn't acquisition anymore.
No, it's cultivation. We need to focus on moving up the value chain from data to wisdom. A steward understands that progression. Raw data only becomes information when it's organized.
And information becomes knowledge when you understand it.
Right, but knowledge only becomes wisdom when it's properly filtered and applied in the right context at the right time.
So the leader has to act as a wisdom curator. What's the practical difference between a manager who just receives information and a steward who curates wisdom.
Well, a manager just floods the team with the latest reports, and that leads to analysis paralysis. A steward leader implements systems to filter and distill. They create centralized knowledge bases. They host wisdom sharing sessions focused on lessons learned, not just new data points.
So they're actively removing the information silos.
Exactly. They turn scattered data into actionable intelligence. That saves the team immense amounts of time and makes sure that historical lessons actually inform future decisions.
That's a powerful way to steward time and knowledge at the same time. Okay, finally, let's talk about stewarding influence and platform the authority we hold.
This is maybe the most profound responsibility. The sources draw on the model of servant leadership, where authority is delegated entirely for service, not for self-promotion. We see this principle reinforced so clearly. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve.
So a steward sees their platform as leverage.
Leverage for what, though?
That's the question.
To advocate for those without a voice, to inspire action toward a shared goal, and critically, to build bridges, not walls. The misuse of influence, whether it's abuse of power, constant self-promotion, or silence in the face of injustice, that is described as the deepest failure of stewardship.
Because you were given the platform to lift others up.
And if you only use it to fortify your own position, you've failed the core mandate.
Okay, we've covered the mindset, the key resources. This all sounds fantastic, but how do we make sure this isn't just symbolic? We have to institutionalize it. It has to be systemic. The source material introduces a great concept for this, the Stewardship Lab.
The Stewardship Lab, it's a formal, ongoing experiment space for continuous resource improvement. It uses that reliable, iterative cycle, plan, do, check, act. You can't just launch a culture change. You have to pilot it and refine it.
Okay, let's walk through an example. Let's say we identify a major resource drain like meeting overload and fragmented communication.
Yeah.
How would we run that through the lab, though?
Perfect. That's a resource challenge rooted in poor time and knowledge stewardship. So, phase 1, plan. The pain point is 50% of our team's time is in meetings and communication is lost in email chains.
Right.
The plan is to pilot a system where all project updates move to a central project management tool, and we cut the length of all recurring meetings by half.
Okay, phase 2.
Do. You run the pilot, maybe with 3 key departments for 1 quarter. Leaders hold training on the new tool, and they strictly enforce the new 30-minute limit on check-ins.
And phase 3, check.
Yeah.
You measure the impact.
Right. You survey the pilot teams. Did meeting satisfaction improve? Did total meeting minutes actually go down? Did the new dashboard increase clarity? You also have to look for unintended consequences, like maybe it's harder to handle emergencies now.
And finally, phase 4, act.
If the results are good, say a 30% reduction in meeting time and a 20% improvement in clarity, you refine the policy based on the feedback, you standardize the system company-wide, and you officially retire the old, inefficient methods.
And that's how stewardship moves beyond just a good habit for one person into an actual organizational policy. We saw that example of a leader who created a shared leadership ledger, a living document to track commitments about resource allocation. It made stewardship measurable and collective.
And that organizational shift is so critical because it helps the entire company avoid the most dangerous pitfall of all, treating stewardship as merely symbolic.
The values washing trap.
Exactly. If you talk about sustainability, but you consistently burn out your employees, or you talk about innovation, but you fail to fund the tools they need, the organization just becomes cynical. Turnover goes up. Momentum fades. The culture works against your stated values.
And the source material points out that this systemic failure often comes down to resisting the seductive lure of short-term thinking.
That is the steward's nemesis. Short-term thinking is defined as neglecting necessary infrastructure, refusing to develop talent, or burning out your people just to hit an immediate quarterly target.
It stars long-term sustainable success.
It does. A steward knows that the highest rate of return always comes from investing in the foundation that lasts.
So to summarize the huge journey we've taken today, this deep dive shows us that adopting the steward mindset really transforms leadership from, reactive battle against the urgent into a compounding asset.
When you adopt this as your default lens, seeing your role not as ownership but as trusteeship, your decisions just feel cleaner. Your teams are inherently more aligned because they feel equipped and trusted, and your resources, they just stretch further. You discover leverage where other people only see limits.
It's a call to lead not just effectively, but redemptively, multiplying your impact.
That's right.
So you've now seen the foundation, the 6 key areas of tangible and intangible resources, and the practical frameworks, like the Stewardship Lab, that are designed to institutionalize this mindset.
And as you carry this forward and start designing your own systems and routines, we want to leave you with one final challenging question from our source material that just cuts straight to the heart of what this all means for the people you serve.
How will the people under your leadership remember your stewardship of them years from now?